because we're so inoculated, indoctrinated with the idea of God who has only one son, no daughters, no grandkids, in terms of family structure, that we've become virtually monumental about God and sonship, and we need to rip that kind of veil that prevents us from understanding the inherent quality of Godhood in our nature. See? Because the Christian is not going to relinquish Jesus as the only begotten of the Father. And the term, the operative word there is begotten. When someone above you helps to develop your spiritual station or statue, that being, person, man or woman, divinity, is begetting you, is making you over into a new creature, as the term would have it. So that is the begetting of. From a spiritual standpoint, we're not concerned about being adopted by anybody. Christians are adopted by God. Muslims are the slaves of Allah. We're not into that kind of thinking. We're talking about the manifestation, expression of the one being, beingness, primal essence, the first cause, manifesting as you. That's what we're talking about in Moorish science. That you don't need to become a Christian, Muslim, Hebrew, or Jew to obtain your spiritual birthright. You need to study to obtain your spiritual birthright. You need to meditate and to find some techniques or technique that is harmonious with your consciousness, that will help you change, raise your consciousness and raise your sense of rhythm. CMB made an effort to condense an enormous amount of information into two pamphlets as study guides. And again, we need to understand something. The classroom is the working process of learning how to learn, of learning what to learn, so that you will know your truth. It is not an all-encompassment of neither 12 years or 4 years or 8 years of anybody's degree is going to give you the knowledge that you are supposed to acquire. That furtherance of your educare is up to you. We got some brothers who took 2 classes, 4 classes, and they ain't seen them in 5 years, There's one brother, he's gone now, But his head is tuned into one area, and that's the lottery. It's Capricorn. So money is uppermost in his mind. But we're trying to get inside this circle and move in it intelligently so that we know what we're doing. The most expedient way to do that is to do it from your own point of view, who you are. Okay. He did not like concepts like Jehovah, Allah, Jesus, because he recognized them as belonging to theological terminologies and was not into the retranslation of those terms for the sake of certain spiritual practices, in terms of the Sufi practice of wazifa, which is a Moorish science, but on another level. CM was pretty much the Masonic Moor. Now he kept the ideal of being a Mason very much in front of him. And what we're discovering is that Eurocentric Masonry is a modification of ancient Moorish science. They altered the scheme of the zodiac of the temple of Dendera. There are certain symbols that were used there that are not being used here. So we need to understand and appreciate it, because like on Fridays we're dealing with Hiram Abiff and the symbology of Hiram and the Temple of Solomon and the symbology of the scriptures, you know. But in the real of where this structuring of and the mythology of our ancient past really did happen, because the European Mason wrote himself into history with a pen. And we need to understand that. This man borrowed our past, stole our past, confiscated our past, and then closed the door and said we wasn't there. Okay, that's stealing. That's a conspiracy. And it has psychologically undermined the growth and development of the descendants of those ancient peoples of both, quote, Africa and those who came into Europe as invaders and transformed Europe into a civil, cultured continent, gave culture to the European populace. But again, they were invaders. And all invaders eventually must leave the territory that they invade. All invaders. The European in America is an invader. Okay? All invaders must eventually leave the territory they invaded. Now, how will that happen? Will the American Indian rise up and up? Will black folks? No. They're going to be transformed into Malawis, into mixed people. The overflow of the Mexican and the South American is part of the reprocessing of amalgamation, of changing them into another people. Probably in another 500 years, they'll wonder what a European was. Well, you know about the color code. He used also the Roman cross order code of the I, the V, the L, and the X. He lists it here because, again, this shows that the European before the Moors did not have numeros. They did not have numbers. And the depiction is given as a standard in terms of their clock. Did not have ancient Kemetic numbers. There was a page in the African Presence in Early America by Ivan van Sertima of a stela that a European German geologist found called Van Hauser, where he gives depiction of okay, this is the one he used for almost right. Can you see what number that is? All right. He gives a stela, a ancient piece of artifice of all of the numbers in snake or Urias form, the serpent in the form of the 8, the 7, and others in human form. The 0, of course, is serpent swallowing his tongue, his tail rather. Okay. It gave all of those forms of the 0 and 9 numerals that are Kemetic, that were incorporated into the so-called Arabic math system. The last publication of that particular edition did not have that in it. I don't know if Van Houser wrote him or called him and told him not to publish it. I don't know what happened. The first copy that I bought had that in it. And I was in Cleveland. When I got here down to the shrine and bought it, it wasn't in there. I don't know what happened. I don't recall exactly, my brother, if it was found here or I don't recall. What bothered me most was that, for whatever strange reason, he didn't republish that very important factor. Ali Aswan is an ancient Kemetic Moor whom Sheikh Anta Diop, the author of the African Origin of Civilization, stated at a cultural conference in Cairo, where half the audience were Arab and the other half were African, that it was Ali Aswan who invented the characters of the so-called Arabic language. And Aswan means black. And his name was Ali Aswan before he created the characters. And they almost had a race ride. And the president of the Cairo University, according to Ivan Van Sertima, stood up and said, Ali Aswan was white, even though he was black. Arab boy's head gone. But it just indicates the kind of problem magnified that we've had to deal, that our parents had to deal with, and their parents had to deal with, outside of the range of their consciousness. My perennial generation really didn't know what racism was all about, except that small group that were studious enough to become aware and awake that what was happening to them. It's best depicted in Baraka's poem of being, not Baraka, but Kosasili said, moving away from things, dazed and bedazzled by everything. I would then move myself towards some skyward desire, Kosasili, towards heaven. But that the African was completely confused of why he was being mistreated, maltreated in his own land. You see, told what to do by strangers who looked completely different from them. And of course they were carrying the fire stick, which made them obedient up to certain degrees. And then the complexity of this culture that left black folks on the outside of the job market, career market, ownership market, cleaning floors, doing windows, shining shoes, So that we're talking about really a tremendous psychological disadvantage, tremendous psychological disadvantage. He gets on the priesthood here and all of those connected with authority of Europe in terms of astrology and astronomy. And he said something in the other pamphlets very appropriate, that it was the Franciscan priest class that backed racism in this country and were behind slavery and the conspiracy against Moors. Because what he was talking about during that period after the expulsion of the Moors, the rulers of Europe was not the king and queen. It was the Catholic Church. That's who had the power. Remember, they had to separate church and state. Then they had to do it again over here. Okay? That who had the money, the booty from the invasions of European armies went to the church. The great paintings of other countries and culture, when they were invaded, the soldiers brought that bounty back to the Vatican and put it in the Vatican's library and art storage. Yeah. The Moors ripped them off for it and then sold it back to them for $1 million. I'm just going to kind of leaf through this. This is, C.FREEMAN was not a writer, first of all. Secondly, he was not academically educated. You know, but he was aware and conscious. So he could put these two little pamphlets together, you know. And it was probably really hard work for him, you know. But he was also very knowledgeable. You know. That was his mission. Yes, right. He understood that to be his karmic mission, was to get these two little pamphlets out. Now he gives in both of them a different calendar of dating of Moorish time versus Western Standard Time. And we know they changed the clock, the time standard. Today you always supposed to move your watches up an hour. Okay? They were fitting these time zones in so they could get more work hours out of the day in Europe and then in America during the industrial rise. Okay? So we know they tampered with the calendar. You know? And the problem I have without the verification of is he claims that every Catholic priest was an astronomer and astrologer. And that has not been my experience. Used to buddy around with a little Catholic priest at Xavier University named David, about this big, short dude, who was a real dummy, you know. So I knew he wasn't no astrologer, you know. But that may have been true earlier during the Moors' occupation of Europe, because the knowledge that the Moors were working with forced the Catholic priesthood to consider the study of both astronomy and astrology. If they had been doing it prior to that, then that would give them credibility as being the masters of both astrology and astronomy. But what is it Diane Drew or Crew that states, one of the other writers in the Golden Age of the Moors, is that what the Catholic priests start doing when they realized that the Moors had started these free schools and were educating Iberians, now called Spaniards. They started getting the textbooks and retranslating them from Arabic to Latin. And they had evidently at some point planned to do this burning of the libraries in Cordoba, Granada, Valencia, and of course Cadiz was the first place it seems that they repaired, but in a number of places where they had established these elaborate free universities, and that they were going to burn the books. Yes.